yet? What's the word on the street? What kind of questions have you been getting?
On in the community that I've seen you involved in, but I was seeing and talking to people on the East Coast, which seemed to be kind of intense, some educating people in education. And it just seems like we're going through this thing, this pendulum swing. But as we move forward and different things happen in the election, and hopefully you are in there, how do we keep moving forward with, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, in our schools, and then catching kids up as well from the COVID year, and then as well, how do you see the pushback on critical race theory and all that work that we've done and accomplished this last few years? I mean, people have, and moving teachers' education forward for a more balanced way of educating and teaching our children to raise another generation of kids that, are being raised on truth rather than lies, basically. So I just to put it kind of simply, like, I don't know, just where are you with all that?
It would baffle me if it didn't make perfect sense, is the
Right.
is the reality of it. I think in California in particular, because we have Prop 209 in place, which really is a proposition that has encouraged California to think non-critically and about race, and to, in some ways, commit erasure and recognize that for whatever, try to attempt to kind of posit that racial inequality in California doesn't exist. I think it's something that we have to absolutely tackle, and it's one of the things that I'm looking forward to shedding some light on. Right, we came so close with Prop 16, but we didn't get there with the voting public. But we have to legislate that kind of change now. I think the pushback on critical race theory is a vestige of that desire to be completely ignorant of the reality of the importance for us to be able to have cogent discourse about the impact of race and systemic inequity and racial inequality. So I think it's one thing. You can't ever change what's in the hearts of people, but you can certainly particularly focus on legislating to ensure that there's an opportunity to have something different in one's mind. And so I'm looking forward to being able to not only ensuring that we have the opportunity to focus on critical race theory in the state of California, but also be leading in that regard across the country, and taking on Prop 209 and the elimination of Prop 209 through legislative action, so that we can actually recognize in this state of California that race does matter and racial inequality does exist. And there are constructs that we've been living by that have caused us to create a world where we are harming each other because we're not able to have the kind of conversation and discourse that would allow us to be able to be integrated in our thinking.
Thank you.
Yes. We have some questions here. So our first question says, why are you, Mia, running for state assembly? And actually, we just briefly talked about that. But,
we did. I'm running because I feel like we have so much more to do in this state in terms of ensuring that we have the ability to take on these very complex concerns related to COVID relief and recovery in an equitable way, taking on the root causes of housing affordability and homelessness, take on issues related to reopening our schools. And I think going through COVID and these last 18 months and seeing the ways in which we could have had such a tighter system in terms of what was the decisions that were being made in the state capitol, how they were being translated to the county, and what the impact of those decisions were at the local level. Like there was lots of opportunity along the way during COVID to for improvement and for tightening. And as I was thinking about who needed to be able to be in this seat right now and in this moment, I really just wanted somebody who could kind of roll up their sleeves and think about people first, and think about the frontline, our frontline forces, our nonprofit organizations, our frontline people who have been working to ensure that people could be safe and move on and address economic inequality and housing affordability and all of that. And for me, the image of what came up in my mind was just someone who can roll up their sleeves, problem solve, be people focused, family focused, and kid focused, and get things done. And I always look at a job and see if I'm actually qualified for that job. And in this moment, I thought, if that's what we need, knowing the path that I've had, where I've had to apply all of those skills and attributes, I'd be really good at it. And so decided to run.
And we agree.
Thank you.
The next question says, which was actually one of the questions I wanted to pose to you, was, what are your top legislative priorities should you be elected to the assembly? And I was going to say, what is the first issue you want to tackle and why? So I guess those two kind of meld a little bit together.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a incredible surplus opportunity. There's incredible opportunity with the surplus that the state is experiencing right now, and the one-time surplus, and then the addition of the federal funds that that the state is going to be receiving. And I want us to use that money wisely. I've always come from a perspective that, from a life perspective, that money and resources need to be used methodically and deliberately, and with good cause and purpose. And I want to make sure that as we're recovering from COVID, that those resources are being applied in a way that's actually going to make a difference in every person's life. And so I think one of the first orders of business is to participate in the allocation of those resources, and to put forward legislation, or to be a part of legislation that would really ensure that happens. There's a lot of opportunity for one-time expenses that build out our infrastructure to be able to support long-term impact. And so I think about single-payer healthcare, for instance, is something that we absolutely should have. Healthcare is a human right. And we have this surplus. How are we going to use that surplus to be able to really build out the infrastructure that we need to support a single payer healthcare system? We know that our children right now are needing to be able to get back into school, and that everyone's coming in with very different, start points, impacted by the inequities that existed before COVID and exacerbated by the realities of what happened during COVID for people. And I want to make sure that we're thinking about how we're allocating those dollars and resources and providing opportunity for hopefully transformational educational opportunities right now, to be a focus that we have. So it's a little bit of a wonky answer, but the priority is to build out the infrastructure that's going to allow us to be able to recover in a transformative way from COVID, not in a surviving way from COVID. And that goes for housing, healthcare, education, and writ large. So I think that's my top priority, because that's what we need right now to be able to focus on.
I love that, because this is because we kind of got flipped on our ear, and it is an opportunity. Anytime that you have to repair or rebuild, it's an opportunity to look at the old design flaws and make it better, and put something stronger in place. And so I love that. Yes. So here's a question. Tell me a little bit about your upbringing. how does your personal background inform the issues you care about? And I think I know a little bit about this answer. So
You do, and we get to talk a little bit about something. So I was raised by activists. Both of my parents were part of the Young Lords Party, which is the Puerto Rican analog to the Black Panthers Party here in Oakland. And they really raised me with the sensibility of activism, and activism being able to be supported through service. And I always joke that when, you know, people lob an insult like, your mother wears combat boots, I was like, yeah, she does, and she didn't wear a bra while she was doing it either. She was a
I
part
love
of like the women's rights movement as well, in that moment. And she worked every single day of her life, and still in workforce development, ironically, where she was helping people to get back to work. And she would, at the end of every month, sometimes have to still make, you know, the math didn't always add up. And she'd have to make some tough choices between paying the rent or paying a health insurance bill, or putting food in the refrigerator. And I think that kind of longing and wanting, and kind of, because I was an only child to a single mother, really, it stuck with me, and I knew what was happening, and I knew the experience of poverty that resulted in us having to move 13 times in 16 years, and having that kind of transience, and that comes, and that kind of feeling of chaos, and not necessarily knowing that your setup today is going to be your setup a month from now. Those things stick with you. And I had the opportunity to be able to go to an amazing educational institution that was a Quaker school, that was the home of a part of the Underground Railroad, and to be a part of that experience, and to be a part of the sensibility of consensus building and service, and having those ideals of Quakerism and faith kind of instilled in me from the time I was 9 years old till when I graduated when I was 17. It really shaped who I was. And I think that, in addition to just coming from a wealth of family support, strong women, strong Puerto Rican, Black, Latina women who were just powerful in their own right, and coming from a very large family. I have 11, on my father's side, I have 11 aunts and uncles, and I think over like 100 cousins. And I was one of the first, my father was the first on his side to go to college. And just having more awareness about privilege and opportunity, and being a little bit too precocious, I think, as a child, kind of really put in my mind that I didn't want to be the only in a room. And so I dedicated my life to really being able to create more in my work in education and youth service, and in family service. And so it's been a joy to be able to do that. But I think that upbringing really kind of put in my mind a great sensibility around service, community, and always walking through a door and putting your hand back to reach for the next one.
Mm. And I love this because this is the part that people don't really necessarily get to know about you, and that this is what that you're operating out of a true sense, and out of an authentic and sincere sense of knowing it. One of my favorite expressions is that I don't give because I have so much. I give because I know what it's like to have so little.
Mm.
And I think that speaks to that, your experiences and the passion behind it, and where that passion comes from. So that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. People kind of, particularly in Alameda, know me as a particular person, and at a particular moment in time. And I'm still walking around feeling like that 14-year-old that loved her creative books that move from one place to another so quickly and easily. And that's who I am. That's who I will always be. And so, yeah, that's how I approach the world.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there are those that only want to look at what they want to look at, and we can't do anything about those. We just stay true to our path and just keep moving forward, and that's how you get the work done. And you've been an inspiration and an example of that to me, actually. So I really appreciate that about you. Now, another question is about Oakland Promise. You're currently the CEO of Oakland Promise. Could you explain a bit about the work Oakland Promise does for folks here who may not be familiar? And tell us about how your career as a nonprofit leader has prepared you to serve in the assembly.
Well, I love Oakland Promise. I've been able to be the first CEO of Oakland Promise as it got stood up as an independent 501c3 with a governing board that's really dictating its efforts. Oakland Promise is about fulfilling a promise that was made to Oakland's kids to ensure that we were creating strong pathways and opportunities from the time a baby is born with need to see them through to post-secondary experiences where they would be able to be successful. And that's either a community college, a certificated program, or a four-year college. And the intention was to really be, and the reality is that we provide scholarship opportunities, set up college savings accounts from cradle to and through college to career. And when we are successful, it will result in thousands of children in Oakland having a pathway set for them, college savings account set up for them, early college scholarships provided to them that will enable them to be able to turn around, have the kind of post-secondary experiences that they need, and then come back to Oakland to be of service to Oakland, to be our entrepreneurs and our clergy people and our nonprofit providers and our business leaders and our teachers and our firefighters and our tradespeople. And I think it's the truest form of economic development that we would want for a city. So I'm very thankful to be able to participate in this incredible organization. And I think it is a perfect kind of aspect of what I've had been doing for many years before in providing and working in the nonprofit sector. I was able to found Lit Lab in West Oakland, and that was focused on early learners and technology. Worked in providing kind of middle school to college pipeline supports through an organization called Breakthrough Collaborative, and worked on the philanthropy side at the San Francisco Foundation, Stepsky Foundation. Along the way is really identifying powerful leaders in our community who were focused on building up educational opportunities, health, wellness, social justice initiatives in the Bay Area. So it was an initial kind of first investment in myself. I actually paid myself to go to work after childcare and transportation and lunch, commuting into San Francisco and paying for lunch every single day. But it set me on a path to really be able to work in community through the nonprofit sector. And when I think about it, like the nonprofit sector is really the fourth arm of government. like it just is. Like we rely so heavily on these leaders who are so close to, and organizations who are so close to the work of serving our community, and we are continually under-resourced, continually undervalued, and it's where all of the solutions come from that are right there that we then want the state to be able to look at and replicate to be able to scale up and make a part of what the government is doing at a broader scale. And so having the opportunity to see so many different solutions being offered to the community through like kind of the philanthropic lens or the practitioner lens across housing, health, economic development, workforce development, and education, I think really lends itself to an opportunity to figure out what we need to do and bring it to the state and make it not only work in our district in Oakland, Alameda, and San Leandro, but something that we can, have an impact in Los Angeles and other parts of the Central Valley, other parts of the state who need different resources.
Mhm. So what well, actually, you already answered this next question about where you stand on school reopening and how you plan to address issues like learning loss and mental health issues. And so the next question would be about hate crimes against members of the AAPI community have shaken our wider Oakland community in recent months. What will you do to address and prevent these hate crimes from happening in the future? Now, it seems to me to be a tough question because as a legislator, again, you already mentioned you can't really change hearts and minds. But anyway, let me let you answer that question.
I'd love to have a conversation around that. I think our role in the state legislature is to identify ways that we can smooth friction points, I think. And one of the realities that we know that has resulted in, over, I think kind of in our nation, over like 6,600 crimes against the AAPI community being committed is really based in decades and generations of a construct that was very anti-Asian and very anti-Asian American and Asian Pacific Islander communities. And so what can we do at the state level? I think a lot of what we can do is break down the sensibility of having monolithic groups that have one particular need. There's so much diversity in the AAPI community. We don't have the ability to fully understand the kinds of assets and needs that that very rich community brings us. And so like focusing on disaggregating our data and implementing already existing disaggregation legislation for different sectors, I think is a piece of it. Allowing and giving space and enabling the stories of our AAPI community members to be told with value and with their appropriate kind of placement in terms of, the fact that California was built largely on many of the backs of our AAPI community members, and having that be a part of our cultural awareness and cultural history and what's taught in our schools and what's, what every child comes to know as what is a part of our California history, I think is something that we can do. Making sure that we are creating opportunities to have, a lot of different language-based resources provided. There's so much lack of access to be able to even report out crimes that are committed against the AAPI community members because of language barriers. Even our, Alameda Unified School District, only school districts are only required to go down into their kind of top handful of languages that they need to translate into by requirements, when there are so many that are left not being communicated with because we're not taking that extra step. So I think that there's a lot we can do to ensure that our AAPI community doesn't continue to be unseen. And when we are seen collectively, when the AAPI community is seen collectively, that we are recognizing and lifting up their contributions to our community, to our economy, to our cultural experience. And so we can't legislate what's in the heart, but we can offer different things to be put in the minds.
Yeah, yes. There's this next question I believe, is an overlapping question, and there's a lot of intersection with the social dysfunctions of what we all face in our society. And this next question talks about continuing with local issues and racial justice, having been in the front of our minds for many members of our community over the last year and much more, not just this last year, but what are your stances on criminal justice reform and holding law enforcement accountable for misconduct? And this was actually a conversation I was having with Rob about a week or so ago. And so I'm pretty sure I already kind of know your stance, but just so people can hear it, how would you address this question?
There's so much work that we have to do. It took us, generations to build out a public safety system that was framed in and constructed based on systemic racism. And so this is not an overnight thing for us, but we have to put in the work to dismantle that system so that we are not engaged in kind of writ large from a criminal justice perspective, that we are not overcharging and over policing based on race, based on your economic status, based on the fact that one is poor, the fact that we are experiencing kind of mental health, different kinds of mental health needs. And we have a lot of work to do to get police out of places and spaces where they don't belong. Police should not have been the first on the scene for so many of people who ended up dying at the hands of police because they were untrained, because they had bias ingrained in them, because they were actually trained to do exactly what they did, which was to kill Black and brown, so many Black and brown people. And often our police go unchecked, right? So we need to have stronger laws and protections to ensure that we are being transparent about police misconduct. And so, things like SB2 that allow us to be able to ensure that police aren't kind of doing misconduct in one county and then popping up in another county unchecked. We have to stop that. We have to make sure that there's a different kind of training that's happening for police officers so that they aren't in the habit of killing because of the kinds of restraints that they use. And we also just need to make sure that they don't show up in the first place to places where, when we need care, we're met with force. And I think that where we are right now is that we're having every city reinvent and reimagine public safety, when in fact what we should be doing as a state is reconstructing our public safety system so that cities don't have a choice, right? We live in one of the most progressive districts in the state of California, and look at how hard we've had to fight to be able to get not a lot over the course of a year and a half. And this isn't a place where we're likely to be the most progressive. Imagine what other parts of the states are, where it's a very different reality for that. So I think the state has a big responsibility to take on much more proactive measures that not only incentivize cities, but require cities to be able to put forward very strong proactive police accountability measures and criminal justice reforms within each state. And that ranges from first responder efforts to bring mental health first, to different hotlines and opportunities to be able to provide alternative care services and models that we have existing, to be able to reconstruct the allocation of dollars to other departments that are not police agencies, to be able to ensure that they have the resources that they need. And we need to focus police where they need to around violent crime, because that is something that is also killing our Black and brown people in this district in particular, and in the state. So it's going to take us a long time to be able to unravel the generations of a public safety system that was ensconced and in systemic racism, and we're going to have to do it together.
I'd actually like to ask another question related to that. So with the decertification that you mentioned, what do you see as the obstacles to that?
I think police unions are an obstacle to that. I think conservative police structures are obstacles to that, like what our DAs are doing, whether or not they are going to be proponents or not for that is going to be a potential obstacle for that. There are a lot of, the closer you get to individual records, personnel records, the stronger the objections will become. And I think that those are some of the major obstacles that we're facing.
Mm-hmm. So we have a question from Jody, who just joined us. She says, I have a son with autism and I've been scared to call the police for help because afraid my son will be treated like a criminal. So I've been interested in opening a discussion with police about training and possible database of at-risk people so they can know in advance what to do in these circumstances. And I know Jody's concerns are shared by many in the community about calling the police, because who do I call when something's going on? And this person the person I'm calling about is the person that needs the help.
Yeah.
And that we don't need to be protected from them. They need to be helped. And who do we call? Would you like to speak to her inquiry?
Jody, I really appreciate the framing of the question, and I share your concern, just as a woman with brown kids, and should they ever need help. I think my hope and my dream is that if your son needed support, the first call that you would have to make wouldn't be the police. That we get so strong in our infrastructure of support for people that you'll have other alternative responses to be able to, responders to when your son, and I hope this doesn't happen for him, but should your son be in a crisis moment and he needs additional support, I think your idea of creating an opportunity for people to voluntarily provide information about any potential need that they might have as citizens is a really great idea that deserves a lot more exploration. Would definitely want it to be something that people can voluntarily decide to participate in to be able to protect civil liberties. But I think it would be another data point that somebody who is a first responder would be able to more proactively be able to access as they are walking into a particular situation. So I love the idea, and I'm sorry that that has to be a concern that you have and that so many need to have, and it's very real.
So we're actually running a little bit over time, but I'm fine to stay as long as everybody else is.
I can stay for a couple more minutes.
Okay.
I see Jody responded and said, I'd love to work towards creating a way to create that vision. And I would love to have you work with us on that, Jody. Look forward to staying in touch. Absolutely.
And let's see, there was, there's two questions here that we have left up. How about I let you pick between the two. The one was about, well, we have a pretty big field of candidates. And the question is, what makes you different and why should voters choose you to represent our district? The other question is about your stance on climate change and fracking. So I'm going to let you pick which one you want to tackle.
I'm going to just quickly share that I believe that we should have an absolute ban on fracking. It is one of the ways in which we are not protecting our climate right now. We don't need to pull out any more carbon from our earth anymore. And in reality, we actually need to proactively decarbonize our economy and our usage to be able to ensure that your children and my grandchildren and our generations to come have a California and a clean California to come to, and that our children today and people today, particularly if you put an equity lens on it, do not have to suffer from the levels of toxicity that come from greenhouse gas emissions and our use of carbon and fossil fuels in our current context. So that's my quick stance on climate change, and there's so much more of it and to it, and we should at some point talk more about that. I love this question about why you, and there are so many candidates, having gone through so many forums with many of the candidates. I think what you, for the most part, get is that we have very similar policy stances on the majority of the issues. And so as a voter, me, if I'm sitting there thinking about, all of these people start to sound the same in terms of their policy stance, my request of you all is to really think about putting the people back into politics. I am my own person. I am a woman who has gone through this world as a Black Latina, who has had the experience of poverty, who has had the experience of displacement, who has had the experience of being able to have educational opportunity, and who has had the experience of serving my community for the past 25 years and being able to roll up my sleeves, problem solve, be solution oriented, focus on building coalitions and looking and responding to what we need and making sure that we have the opportunity to have the solutions that will address those needs. And so we're all different because we're all different people. And I believe in this moment in time that I, as somebody who has had that kind of life experience and work experience, and who has the relationships to be able to build upon, not only in the district, but also in the state capitol, am a really great, strong candidate for what we need right now in the California State Legislature. And that's why I think people should vote for me.
Yes, thank you so much. Do we have, where are we on time?
I think we're close to wrapping up.
Yeah.
But John and Madeline, thank you so much for creating this space and just getting the word out and giving us an opportunity to be able to visit with you all. I think Seelan's going to come on and say you can actually take your phone right now and use a QR code, take a picture of this, use your camera, and you'd be able to support the campaign and volunteer, donate to it. This primary election is on June 29th, right around the corner. We're in the thick of it right now, and would love to be able to have you all join the campaign if you've heard something that has been compelling to you, and I hope you have. And at the end of the day, hoping that you'll cast a vote for Mia Bonta for in the special election for State Assembly.
Mia, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're getting pulled in many directions right now these days. And so thank you for taking the time to, let us all know a little bit more about who you are and why you are who you are and what you're going to do with that and what that person is going to do for all of us. So I really appreciate you being here. And, if I may, all these questions, I have to say, each question was an entire half a day conversation in itself. And the fact that you were able to just actually answer them so poignantly in such a small space of time is really, it's really not an easy thing to do, because there's so much more conversation that can and will happen around each of those questions. So thank you again. I really appreciate you. I appreciate knowing you, and I'm glad that you're taking this step onto a larger platform to serve all of the communities and on the issues that we all really care and concerned about.
Thank you so much, John. Appreciate you. And thanks for everyone to join. See you soon. Bye.
Have a great evening. Bye. Thank you all.